Hello, everyone. I'm Peter Wells. So I suppose just to give a little bit of context first, that a lot of the work I'm going to be talking about was done by a company called If and Google DeepMind Health, as was when Google DeepMind Health was a thing. I didn't actually work on the project, and I'm currently on a sabbatical, not working for anybody. So the slides will appear a little bit strange as I'm like doing it as an independent rather than as one of those organisations. So just to explain that a little bit, myself, I'm a technologist. So I'm I call myself sometimes a Peter of some trades. So I do bits of technology, bits of policy, bits of design, bits of product. I work around lots of different places. So hopefully that will come through a little bit in the talk. What I want to talk about in this context of bringing verifiable logs, using those to bring transparency to human-centered transparency to healthcare, was just talk about the problem that these organisations faced, human-centered transparency using verifiable logs, and then some takeaways from there. Now the problem, going back a few years, Google DeepMind Health was facing a backlash when it tried to launch some services in the UK, actually near here at Royal Free Hospital. Don't go too deep into what those challenges were, but they were trying to bring a new service that was talked about at the time using AI or algorithms, try to help spot some kidney diseases earlier than people were spotting them, than doctors were spotting them themselves. And they were getting criticism through the media, from civil society organisations, from some healthcare professionals who didn't quite trust the service would do what it said, and then from the regulators, which has meant it was hard for them to actually launch the service and get it to scale. But some people were convinced this could actually save some lives if we were to do it well. So okay, how do we get ourselves out of this problem? And when they looked at the challenges, one of the big challenges was around data flows. So healthcare data, for anyone who's worked in healthcare, it's famously complicated, particularly in legacy systems and legacy healthcare operations, which have been around for sometimes centuries, and that's not just the computers that have been around for centuries, it's the institutions too. It's extremely sensitive data. People do react strongly to concerns about healthcare data, particularly primary healthcare data about individuals. The new service was making promises about how data would be used and controlled so that it wouldn't be leaking out from outside of delivering that primary healthcare service. But could those promises really be trusted? They're getting this backlash. People say, how do we trust these organisations, the Royal Free Hospital, the doctors there, Google DeepMind Health, to actually do what they're saying with the data? So that was the challenge they were facing. So it started by looking at human-centered transparency. Can we bring some transparency to those data flows? And when you start to look at that, particularly in a healthcare system, there's a lot of different people involved. Actually, it's similar to actually even in software development, like PyPI, there's a lot of actual different people and organisations. It's not just developers who's in the ecosystems, it's security managers, it's policymakers, it's a range of organisations developing software or consuming software. But in healthcare, you've got into patients, their families, medical professionals who've got this real concern of doing the best for their patients. They've got their professional codes to make sure they're doing that. We've got regulators, civil society organisations with different motivations. And each of those have got different concerns, needs and behaviours around this transparency and their requirements. And often it's hard for them to imagine what can be around transparency. They're used to what already exists, most people. So what was required to actually start to understand some of those concerns and behaviours was to show them design prompts to try to uncover people's needs around trust, transparency. And if we're talking about promises and promises that can be broken, when you start to get into policy world, that becomes accountability. So you have to design some prompts because people can only really limit it to what they can imagine today. You have to start to show them what could be in the future to understand what they're about. And a lot of this work was done by If, one of the organisations I've done a lot of work for over the last few years, including on Sigstore, which I heard next here being mentioned in the previous talk. If and Google DeepMind Health were interested in, could verifiable logs help? Now, this is an audience I don't need to explain verifiable logs to, but I put this slide in there for a different audience so that when people see these slides on the internet, they can click a link and find out a little bit more. So in parallel, we're starting to imagine what could be in terms of artifacts and services, they were also designing a conceptual architecture. So we had product teams and designers and user researchers working closely with engineers to say, how could we architect these flows of data? What would we require to turn those things that could be into reality? What's feasible for us to get built? And then how do we make that real, and how does this respond to what people actually need? So in this case, this is just a conceptual architecture. It's showing different services at the top, going through user authentication, splitting out into multiple different hospitals. In the UK, we'd call them trusts, which can be a small group of hospitals in a geographic area. They have control over their own data flows, so they need their own data assets. They've got their own logs of who works there, what they're allowed to access and control, their own records of their patients and what patients have consented to, whether that be consent to can see a bit of healthcare information or consent to what medical treatments somebody gets. All of those things are stored as consents. And then you can wrap verifiable logs around each of those things to say who is accessing that information. You can make it very strongly tamper-proof and verifiable using those verifiable logs to start to give you, as well as that existing healthcare information, an extra set of information that could be designed into services. But it needed those teams to be working together to say, how do we design these things, how do we engineer these things, and then also how do we design them into a front end, into user-facing services. And that turned into, and this is not going to show, sadly. Let's see what happens if I do this. That got turned into, I'm going to turn the sound on here, so for example, this is actually a service for patients that could help them see as they take their medical treatments or finish their medical treatment, to start to explore what happened with the data about them. All underpinned by verifiable logs, surfacing the existence of verifiable logs and starting to explain it as that was being done. So that this could explain that concept of verifiable logs at what is often actually quite an emotional moment for people as a patient. And by doing that, you're starting to surface not just that the trust that this access thing has been verified, you're also surfacing ways for people to complain if they see something they don't like. So you start to open up a range of other possibilities around that. That could also be surfaced into services for, in this case, healthcare auditors, so that auditors could look at how information was being used and accessed and who by and where, to start to build confidence in that ecosystem and earn trust with what was going on. And these are all real things that were developed and deployed. And fundamentally what we're trying to turn there from was from untrusted data flows into trustworthy records backed up by verifiable logs that was surfaced to that range of stakeholders. I suppose building on that concept of verifiable logs with monitors and auditors around that ecosystem, checking the log has not been tampered with. This starts to give you auditors around your healthcare system to check that your data flows have not been unfairly accessed and tampered with. So it just gives us, again, extending that concept up just to another layer in the software stack or the service stack. I suppose, and I do talk quite fast, but some takeaways from them, going towards that concept of transparency everywhere, is this was about starting with both people and technology. So helping people imagine what could be, understanding that range of needs for the different groups of people, using those insights to help decide what to build, but by imagining what could feasibly be built, starting to work out from there. It required a multidisciplinary team. So it did require that range of skill sets to be able to bring this to life. There's a big thing there about designing verifiable logs to be understandable or explainable in some way. And that was kind of quite a large challenge for the team. I know myself from my work on SigStore, trying to explain how SigStore worked to developers, let alone to other people. There's quite a lot of challenges in those things to say what's the right level of explainability to help people make better decisions, but without overloading them with information, giving them access to more information when they want it, but without overloading them at points where they might be making sensitive decisions, particularly when it comes to healthcare. There's a bit there as well about how that broader use could help with log robustness. Unfortunately, this service in the hospitals did get turned off. I suppose I might make a joke at some point about Google's services, but that might be unfair, given the building we're in. But because in effect through this, those verifiable logs were being used by a wider range of people, that expands the community of people who've got an interest in maintaining the logs, making sure they're being monitored, making sure they're being supported. And as we all know, that can create more robustness in the log when there's more people looking at them, particularly if they've got different kind of motives and incentives and different things they're looking for to see if things have been tampered with. So that kind of broader use, embedding it in the system, starts to help with that robustness challenge. And then, again, going out to that transparency everywhere, it can help earn trust in consumer-facing services. So things like SigStore, the changes to PPI, really, really impactful, but often they're not as visible to people. By starting to embed these things into consumer-facing services, you can have a greater trust in bringing more transparency and earning more trust, making more promises that are more provable, which can help make the internet and the software we all use every day a little bit safer for all of us. And there's just an image there, I suppose, which is a thing which has certainly caught my eye, and I imagine many others, of Apple launching their new AI services with verifiable privacy promises. Again, they're starting to see it as a consumer proposition, not just a back-end proposition in the stuff we do. So that's what I talked about. So that's the end of my talk, because I do tend to talk quite fast and try to get to the point. Apologies if that's been too fast, but I know lunch is possibly late. If you want to know more, my contact information, peterkwells@gmail.com, same on my social media platform, and the IF team are on hello at Projects by IF, again to talk through any of the product and design challenges and opportunities. Thank you very much. I hope that was fun.